Welcome everyone to the Friday edition of our Packers News live chat alongside Jim Owczarski. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers are 48 hours away from their Sunday matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. We'll take a look at the Packers injury report, plus we'll also take a look at the run game for both the Packers and the Colts in just a moment. Before we get into that, as always, you can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question down in the chat. Jim and I will get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. The Packers are a step closer to having their trio of offensive playmakers all together in a game for the first time in a little while. When I say trio, I mean wide receivers Davante Adams, Allen Lazard, and running back Aaron Jones. Wide receiver Davante Adams is active and ready to go. He is off the final injury report as he's been dealing with an ankle injury this past week. Wide receiver Allen Lazard is still working through some things with his core. He is listed as questionable for this upcoming weekend. The Packers haven't had Adams, Lazard, and Jones active and in a game at the same time since week 2. If Lazard is healthy enough to go, what can the three of them bring to this Packers offense?
Yeah, it's interesting because Allen Lazard, I think, established himself a little bit after Davante Adams got hurt in that week 2 game, right? The next week is the big, career-defining game, if you will, for Lazard in New Orleans, in which he injures his core muscle. So I'm a little curious, Olivia, because, he's a complimentary receiver. Davante Adams is clear number 1. Aaron Jones is the clear 1A in terms of the guy Matt LaFleur wants to get the ball to. So where does Lazard fit in? We saw him take advantage of some deeper routes against the Saints, partly because Marquez Valdes-Scantling drew some attention. He's been playing well of late. So it's hard to say. I mean, if Lazard can go, I think he'll be on a pitch count to a degree. I don't know if a guy like that can just walk off injured reserve and just play 80 snaps, maybe 80% of snaps. Maybe he will. But I wouldn't expect, a crazy statistical performance because you're right. It's Davante Adams, it's Aaron Jones, and then where else do they sprinkle in touches for everyone else?
The good injury news does not stop there. Cornerbacks Jaire Alexander and Kevin King are off the injury report and available to play on Sunday. This is good timing for the Packers because good secondary play could be a key to a Packers victory this weekend. When quarterback Philip Rivers throws an interception, the Colts are 2-3. The Packers haven't forced many interceptions. They've only had 4 all season. What do the Packers defense need to do to force some more turnovers?
Yeah, I think it's the thing that they've done the last couple of weeks, Olivia, to Nick Mullins and Josh Luton is get to the quarterback, make them have to scramble out of the pocket, throw under pressure, maybe throw early, maybe a ball is deflected, and that's how they get it. I don't think Philip Rivers – and now he still tries to take some chances, but it's not – I mean, he's not really forcing a whole lot into bad spots all the time. So I think it's really, can they get pressure? Look, the Colts really don't allow much, but that's how they're going to do it. I mean, look, it's a good thing Kevin King and Jaire Alexander will play together for the first time since Atlanta. They're back on October 5th. But Jaire Alexander doesn't really get a ton of interceptions. Kevin King has had a few last year, but again, he hasn't played in, 6 weeks? So it might be a little bit of a tall task, Olivia, to think, yeah, he's just going to go out there, cover T.Y. Hilton, and intercept Philip Rivers. I think those guys are going to need the front 7, the front 4, whoever it may be, to make Philip Rivers throw when he doesn't want to and where he doesn't want to.
Let's take a look at the Colts run game, and I hesitate to call it a run game because they aren't running very far. They are 3.8 yards per attempt, is 29th in the league. However, against the Titans this past week, the Colts unleashed running back Nyheim Hines. He had a season-high 17 touches, 115 all-purpose yards, and 2 touchdowns. How do the Packers stop a dual-threat running back?
Yeah, it's interesting because the last couple weeks, Minnesota and Jacksonville proved, as we've thought, if you're an opponent and you choose to stick with the run game, you can find success. Jonathan Taylor, the Badgers alum, Olivia, his snaps have gone down the last few weeks. And to your point there, Naheem Hines, his have gone up. Again, I don't know if Frank Reich, the Colts head coach, is going to change his stripes, so to speak, and just suddenly become a power run team. That's not what they've done. So I am curious to see how they use Naheem Hines. Is he splitting out like a Tyler Ervin? Are they throwing it to him out of the backfield and trying to get Kamal Martin and Christian Kirksey to make plays? Look, those guys haven't played a whole lot together either. So I think there are some gaps here in the Packers defense that the Colts can take advantage of. What I think most curious about is, do they use Hines in space like that? And then also, do they decide, hey, you know what, Jonathan Taylor, maybe you should get 18 carries this week?
The Colts may not be so great at running the ball. However, they're good at stopping it. Their 3.5 yards per carry allowed is number 1 in the NFL. The Packers, if you think to some of their blowout losses, for example, the 2019 NFC Championship game against the 49ers or the 2020 loss this season to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, what do those two games have in common? They were able to hold the Packers to under 100 rushing yards. How did the Packers keep the foot on the gas this weekend against a strong run defense?
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. So we had this conversation, Olivia, I think before the Tampa Bay game, and that was believing Tampa Bay would stop Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, etc., forcing Aaron Rodgers to have to make plays, a pass game to kind of carry the day. Well, what happened? They stopped the run, and the pass game could not carry the day. It was another blowout loss, to your point. So I don't know. I think that the way to beat the Packers is to stop Aaron Jones. For as crazy as that sounds, I think you have to move back to the start of this conversation, put it on Devontae Adams, Allen Lazard, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Robert Tonyan, and Aaron Rodgers. Can they win the game throwing it 45 times where Aaron Jones is ineffective? We haven't seen that yet. The Packers don't lose often under Matt LaFleur, but the one, as you said, common thread is a lack of a run game, and I guess I haven't seen them be able to just power through a really good run defense yet. Will that happen Sunday? I don't know.
That's a good question. Let's get to some of your questions over on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. We'll start sending some nice wishes here to Joan. Joan says that she's fighting COVID-19 right now, so we're wishing you well, Joan, in your battle. Get well soon. Stay healthy. Stay safe to everybody out there. Let's start with a question here from Long Island Cheesehead. Carolyn, good to see you. Over on Periscope, they ask, with running back Tyler Ervin out and possibly wide receiver Darius Shepard too, who is the backup kick and punt returner, who can we expect as the return specialist? Darius Shepard is questionable to play. Questionable these days tends to mean active for Sunday's game. However, we cannot say that yet for certain that he will be active. However, Chandon Sullivan and Josh Jackson, two cornerbacks, are listed as the third string return specialists. They share that responsibility. If Shepard, for whatever reason, can't go, how likely is it that they stick with Sullivan or Jackson as their return specialist?
Yeah, I think if Shepard can't, those are the guys. I mean, they're not going to put Jair Alexander back on punt return or anything like that. They're going to roll with who has been the next man up, and that's Chandon Sullivan on kicks and Josh Jackson on punts. I think if Shepard is having a nagging issue with the shoulder, Olivia, I could see him being back there, but maybe not asked to create anything. So, for instance, Josh Jackson let a few punts go against Jacksonville. I don't blame him. It was a tough gauge. He was kind of thrown in there in 40-mile-an-hour winds, but Jacksonville was able to pin a lot of those punts inside the 5. Whereas I think Darius Shepard indoors probably can make some decisions there, field the ball cleanly. Even if he's not returning it, he can at least catch it. And maybe they won't worry about that as much. And on kick return, again, I'm curious to see on, Indianapolis side, Olivia, do they push the envelope? Do they make the Packers return it? Chandon Sullivan is probably more dynamic athletically than Darius Shepard. But again, I don't know if you want your starting nickel corner making those decisions in high traffic, high speed areas. So yeah, I think if Shepard can't go, we might see a very conservative return game again.
Thank you, Carolyn, for your question. Let's take a question from Nick over on Facebook. Nick, thank you for joining us tonight. Nick says if the Colts have another big running game, or I suppose if the defense allows another big running game, do you think defensive coordinator Mike Penton's job will be on the line? We've been getting quite a few comments like this, especially after Week 8 against the Minnesota Vikings. The Packers allowed running back Dalvin Cook to have over 200 all-purpose yards. We got a lot of questions about Mike Penton. Is his job in question? Jim, where is Mike Penton's job at the moment so far through 10 games this season?
I mean, the Packers have the number 9 defense in football, Olivia. So I don't – I mean, you look at statistically, it's a good stat, I guess, that makes Packers fans kind of mad that they have a top 10 defense. Usually that's all you hear fans want. Teams want that. Now, granted, they are 15th in points allowed. Their red zone defense has not been as good as a year ago. And that, I think some of that has to do with the fact that they haven't turned anybody over. I mean, Derek Carr, remember, fumbling out of the end zone against, last year at Lambeau Field. Kevin King had a couple red zone interceptions. So did Adrian Amos. That hasn't happened yet in 2020. Is that the coordinator's fault? Probably not. So I look, if the Colts run for 180 yards and they lose, I don't think Mike Penton's job is any different than it is today, which is, I think they'll be evaluated at the end of the year and what happens in the postseason. The Packers, quarterback stays healthy, Olivia, they should be what, 12-4, 13-3? So, yeah, Mike Penton's future, I think, rests on what happens in the postseason because as of now, their defense is still coming together. Think about it, Nick. 2 inside linebackers who haven't played together. Their corners haven't played together. Kenny Clark's finally healthy. He's 2-3 games into his kind of full year. So I think we'll see going forward how this defense develops.
Thank you, Nick, for your question. Craig, our friend from Alberta, Canada, has a question for us. Good to see you, Craig. Craig says, hope the Packers defense can stop Phillip Rivers in Indianapolis. They had trouble a couple years back when he was a Charger. They had some trouble last year against the Chargers. They suffered a loss to the Chargers. Let's take a look at Rivers' stat line that game. He had 21 completions of 28 attempts, 294 passing yards, 108.3 passer rating. 2 sacks. They were able to get after him a little bit. However, new offense, new offensive line, new scheme. How different does Phillip Rivers look in this scheme compared to the Chargers?
Yeah, Craig, it feels like a couple years ago because 2020 feels like 9 years. It was just last year, when the Packers went out to LA and laid an egg. Man, Rivers, this is like a Drew Brees thing to me. He's not going to push the ball down the field. His whole thing is get it out fast, short, catch and run. That's what they did in LA. And Mike Williams beat Jair Alexander for a couple times, and really made some big plays happen down the field in that way. They're not going to throw it deep that often or that effectively. T.Y. Hilton, who I think if you're a fantasy player, I know Olivia's always into the fantasy football tips here. He's not an option this year because why? Phillip Rivers doesn't push the ball. And they're not, it's that catch and run offense, big play offense hasn't been there that I guess Colts fans or would be used to seeing over the years. So Phillip Rivers is the same guy. This goes back to the pressure, Olivia, and how do you create turnovers? That they have to get to him. They have to make him throw it when and where he doesn't want to. And that's a tough deal with this very, very good Colts offensive line.
Thanks for your question, as always. We appreciate you joining us, Craig. Let's take a question from Quinn over on YouTube. Quinn says, do you see the Packers tight ends getting more involved this week? The Packers tight ends have been kind of inconsistent in their targets and their impact in games this season. As of late, it's been pretty quiet from tight ends like Robert Tonyan and Jace Sternberger, who are the Packers' primary passing threats in this offense. How likely is it that Matt LaFleur wants to get these tight ends involved a little bit more in the offense on Sunday? Yeah,
it's a really good question. So much so, Quinn, that I actually went and scrounged around looking for stats against what tight ends have done against the Colts, and frankly, they haven't done much. this goes from big name guys, like Austin Hooper out in Cleveland, high speed tight end in football, to a Kyle Rudolph in Minnesota. Really, guys, Jimmy Graham has probably had the best day of a tight end against the Colts, and that's because he caught a touchdown in the red zone. I mean, the Colts linebackers are fast. They're really good. Their safeties, while young, have been very good in coverage as well. Tight ends in general, Mark Andrews in Baltimore, Nick Boyle in Baltimore, didn't really do much. So on one hand, I'm sure that Matt LaFleur would like to get them involved. That would be finding or solving a puzzle that the Colts, frankly, have done a good job keeping from, being put together from other teams. Tight ends just haven't had that much success. So we'll see. If they can do it, you would think the Packers have a good chance of winning because it's something other teams haven't done.
Thanks, Quinn, for your question. Bryson over on Facebook asks, how much better is the Colts offensive line against the Packers defensive line? It seems like a bit of a mismatch. The Colts offensive line has been great at protecting quarterback Phillip Rivers. They've only allowed 8 sacks this entire season. How much of a mismatch is there between the Packers defensive front and the Colts offensive line?
Well, first, I have to address Bryson's avatar there, Olivia. I can't see the whole meme, but it's Die Hard, and I see not Christmas, and that can't be true because Die Hard is a Christmas movie, and I will fight anyone on that all day on this live stream. So the mismatch, it's a mismatch. I mean, the Packers' defensive line isn't traditional. I mean, it's Kenny Clark. On third down, it's usually just Kenny Clark. I mean, Tyler Lancaster is a good run stuffer. Kingsley Keke is playing better in year 2, as they hope. Dean Lowry has been okay, but they're there to placehold against the run, I guess, and let the Smiths and Rashawn Gary get after the quarterback, Kenny Clark, eat up double teams, try to win those. So on one hand, I get what you're saying where it's a mismatch, but I think what the Packers would like to say is their speed, their edge strength, Kenny Clark, can be their own mismatch. So I guess where this maybe comes into, Bryson, is if the Colts change to that power run game where they want to keep 3 down linemen on the field at all times. Is that a mismatch? I would say yes, because we've seen the Packers get run on. So if the Colts keep them in that type of base heavy scenario, then yeah, I think it's definitely a lean toward Indianapolis.
Thanks, Bryson, for your question. Let's take a question from John over on YouTube. John asks, is this the game where we find out who the 2020 Packers are? The Colts defense presents just the Colts as a whole. They have the number 4 scoring defense in the league, number 14 scoring offense in the league. Where does this game fall on the spectrum of the Packers' tests this season?
Yeah, I think it's got to be at this point right behind Tampa. I don't think New Orleans, the Saints defense was together as it is now, for instance. And of course, now the Saints are without Drew Brees. So yeah, I would slot this right behind Tampa, largely because of what you just said, Olivia. The offense, I mean, they're okay. They play good complementary football. They've won 6 games, but it's not like Tampa's offense is or was. So I think, John, in the sense of if the Packers can't run again and Aaron Rodgers and the pass offense can't handle a good front 7, I think we find out who they are. We find out that they can't beat that kind of a defense because I don't know if they're going to see that again until maybe Chicago, but that offense is so bad, I don't even know if it matters. I think it is a good identity game if you're the Packers to find out, okay, how good are we really? And if the back's up against the wall pass-wise, can they actually make something happen to make up for a lack of a run game?
We'll find out in less than 48 hours. Thank you, John. And thank all of you for your wonderful questions once again. We appreciate it. We will be live before the game on Sunday, so make sure you come back to all of our social platforms to join us. Bring your questions, bring your thoughts, bring some pregame snacks, whatever you want to do. We will see you very soon. Enjoy your Saturday. For Jim Owczarski, I'm Olivia Reiner. We'll see you next time.